Great. Well, thank you to everybody for joining us today on our webinar covering electric transit and school bus initiatives in the Southeast. The first of a three-part webinar series hosted by Clean Cities Coalitions of North Carolina and Plug-in NC, focusing on medium and heavy-duty vehicle electrification. And we're really excited. We've seen a ton of interest in this topic recently. So we hope you all enjoyed today's webinar and learned something new, and hope you all also join us for the remaining 2 webinars in this series, the dates of which will be announced soon. So just one quick plug for the later webinars. The one that will be held in August will be focusing on funding and financing. So if you're interested in funding sources related to electric vehicles, please plan to attend that webinar. So today you're going to hear from Kate Staples, who is the Manager of Electrification for Dominion Energy Virginia, about Dominion's Electric School Bus Pilot Program, followed by a presentation from Jay Perkins and George Linney of Greensboro Transit about the lessons learned since they have deployed their electric transit buses. So just a quick technology update. If you have questions throughout the webinar, feel free to enter those in the Q&A box, which should appear on the right-hand side of your screen. And we'll have some time at the end of the webinar for panel discussion and answering those questions. So before we get into our presentations today, I wanted to provide some context about the Clean Cities program and our interest in medium and heavy-duty electrification. So my name is Caitlin Rose. I'm the coordinator for the Triangle Clean Cities Coalition based out of Durham, North Carolina. For those of you who aren't familiar with Clean Cities, we are a DOE-established program working to reduce petroleum usage at a local and regional level. So there are nearly 100 local coalitions nationwide, and as you can see from the map on your screen, our reach is pretty extensive, and actually about 82% of the U.S. population lives within the area that Clean Cities coalitions serve. And each coalition is led by an on-the-ground Clean Cities coordinator like myself, who tailors projects and activities to capitalize on the unique opportunities in our region. So the biggest asset of the local coalitions is our specific expertise in our local region, and the coordinators serve as both educators and problem solvers for our stakeholders. So in North Carolina, Clean Cities coalitions are housed at councils of governments. So we have a pretty unique regional view of program implementation compared to some of our counterparts in other states. North Carolina is served by 3 coalitions. As I mentioned, I hail from the Durham area with Triangle Clean Cities. We have Central Iowa Clean Fuels out of Charlotte and Land of Sky Clean Vehicles out of Asheville. So while we don't geographically cover the entire state, we all work very closely with statewide partners such as Plug-in NC, as well as between coalitions to extend our reach to best serve the entire state of North Carolina. So on this slide, we've got a couple different strategies that coalitions implement to reduce petroleum usage at a local level. So we focus on alternative fuels as are designated by the Energy Policy Act, and which includes electricity as an alternative fuel. So that is one of several fuel types that Clean Cities works to implement regionally. Medium and heavy-duty electrification technology is being deployed in a lot of different settings right now. So we want to help end users understand the best use case for this technology and how it can be used in their fleets. So we're able to work with fleets of all shapes and sizes, light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles, and everything in between. So before I turn the mic over to Jacob, I have a couple of poll questions for the audience. So question number 1, is your organization or business interested in purchasing an electric transit or school bus in the next 5 years, and understanding that coronavirus might have impacted some plans? So take this question, if this is an ideal scenario, would you be interested in purchasing in the next 5 years? Awesome. Well, while the results are coming in, it looks like most people who are picking yes or no, you've got more people picking yes, so that's good to hear. And it's from what I've heard with stakeholders I work with, this is a topic of extreme interest to a lot of folks in this area. And so next question, this is going to be a free response question. We want to hear about some barriers other than COVID-19 impacting funding, what barriers are preventing your fleet from electrifying? So feel free to type in your answer in that box that just popped up. We're seeing lots of things related to the cost and the funding, as well as vehicle availability, general interest and awareness in electric vehicles. So yeah, this is great to hear. Again, quick plug for our funding webinar in August. Hopefully that can address some of those questions. But a lot of these barriers are things we've been hearing about from the Clean Cities side. So hopefully this webinar today answers some of those questions. So now I'm going to turn the mic over to Jacob Bolin with Plug-in NC.
Thanks, Caitlin. Hope everybody's doing well. Before we really hand it over to our presenters that have programs and buses on the ground, on the roads, just kind of want to make a quick reference to Plug-in NC for any of those that might not be familiar. So Caitlin touched on some of the collaboration that happens between the Clean Cities and the Plug-in NC program. Plug-in NC is a program that's been working since 2011, essentially as an outreach and education platform to really share the benefits, the capabilities, and the technologies related to light-duty, medium-duty, and heavy-duty electric vehicles for drivers, universities, municipalities, and various other stakeholders across the state. So we're really happy to have you guys as part of the network and to share this type of messaging. So just to kind of give a little bit more of a background on kind of the entities that make up Plug-in NC from a kind of a strategic arm, really just want to highlight some of the public and private partnerships, some of the collaborations that happen really through Plug-in NC. And so we're really grateful for all of our steering committee members and as you can see, all of the organizations that include charging manufacturers, that include utilities, that include state governments and agencies, as well as EV drivers clubs and the like. So we're really proud of that partnership, and it's something that really helps bring about a much more comprehensive set of strategies and actions for expanding electrified transportation in the state of North Carolina. Just really quickly, wanted to share kind of what's happening in the state as it relates to electric transit buses. So currently there are 9 organizations or entities that have electric transit bus deployments or very near-term commitments for deploying electric buses, usually through the form of low-no grants, CFAT funding, or other kind of financing mechanisms in which they've submitted purchase orders to receive electric transit buses. The school buses are a little bit more in its infancy, but we're really excited today to hear from Kate and also to hear from Greensboro Transit Authority as it relates to some of the very early kind of on-the-ground deployments of electric transit buses in North Carolina and in the Southeast. Just making one more kind of quick plug here for Plug-in NC and some of the resources. So if there's anything that kind of piques your interest with today's webinar, please check out the website on pluginnc.com. We have a number of different handouts, resources, and educational materials to help support maybe conversations with decision makers, maybe expanding kind of your own level of knowledge and sharing that with the masses. So please feel free to check us out. Now, I think the last thing that I'd just like to share to kind of set the stage for today is actually a very recent announcement that's happened for 15 states across the United States, which is a Memorandum of Understanding signed by governors of 15 states, including North Carolina, to advance collaboration and overall the deployment of zero-emission vehicles in the medium and heavy-duty space between now and really the next 30 years. And so I've listed just a few kind of benchmarks that have been established for these government agencies, for these states, And this is a really exciting partnership. And so if you'd like to learn more, you can certainly find quite a bit out there on North Carolina channels and, again, also nationally. So this is a really, really great time to be learning from some of the experts, like we'll see with Dominion Energy and also with the Greensboro Transit Authority. So I'd just like to say thanks for that, and really excited about the timing of that information. I won't take too much time here just to kind of make a plug for the other webinars within this series, as Caitlin's kind of already referenced that. But hopefully if you enjoyed today's content, please kind of stay on the lookout for our announcements and finalized dates for the remaining 2 webinars of this series as we continue that conversation. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Kate Staples at Dominion Energy to share their updates on the electric school bus program.
Thanks, Jacob. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Great. I think today, did we want to start with a poll question? We wanted to know if anyone on the call has ridden in an electric transit or electric school bus. And we're seeing the results come in, and they are very close to 50-50. It's looking out yes, it's looking like yes is edging out no. That's great. I think if we would have asked that question a couple years ago, we wouldn't have been anywhere near 50-50. So that's a great way to start. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kate Staples. I'm the manager of electrification for Dominion Energy Virginia. We also serve a small portion of North Carolina as well. And I'm currently in Richmond, but our service territory in Virginia extends up to the Potomac. And in North Carolina, we have the eastern part of the state, including the Outer Banks. And we recently announced our commitment to our net zero commitment. We've made a commitment to net zero emissions by 2050. And of course, we are committed to doing that while maintaining the highest level of safety and reliability for our customers. We also, in terms of sustainability and electrification, we want to walk the walk and talk the talk. So we are, every week, we are adding more electric vehicles in our company fleet. We are installing workplace charging for our employees at most of our offices in Virginia and North Carolina. And we're also studying new and innovative electric transportation technologies like autonomous vehicles and VehicletoGrid, the school bus. And that's the topic I wanted to talk on today. Our electric school bus initiative launched last fall. The first phase of this initiative is 50 school buses, and it will help school districts in Virginia that are looking to transition their school bus fleet from diesel to electric. And the way the initiative works is for the first 50 electric school buses, Dominion Energy will offset the cost, the additional cost of going from a traditional diesel school bus to an electric school bus. And we plan to do that for 50 buses in the first phase, and we are planning to have those buses on the roads in Virginia by the end of 2020. So the box on this slide has a couple of the key numbers about the program. So that first one, 50 electric school buses, almost always the first question we get when we talk to other utilities or other school districts or transportation agencies is why 50? And there's a couple reasons. First, in our service territory, we have various areas, various topographies. We have urban, suburban, rural. We have inner city routes, and we have longer rural routes. And so we wanted to test the electric school bus and VehicletoGrid technology in several different use cases. So that was one reason. And then the other reason we did it is we wanted to send a signal to the market that Dominion Energy and the dozens of other electric utilities and transit agencies and transportation professionals that we've spoken with are committed to electric transportation, and we really think the future is electric. So we announced last year that we were going to do 50 electric school buses, and then we sent out a application to our school district to see who would be interested. And with a new technology, we were really hoping that we would at least have folks that were interested in the 50 buses, but we were excited to get interest in over 200 buses. So we had applications for over 200 buses. And we ultimately selected 16 different school districts in Virginia. Some of those school districts are getting as few as 1 or 2 buses, and some are getting as many as 7 or 8. And for the first phase, we did a procurement process, and we selected 1 school bus manufacturer for the first phase. It's a Thomas-built Julie. Thomas is in North Carolina. We toured their facility and were incredibly impressed with their leadership team, their safety record, their commitment to quality, and of course, their battery technology and the warranty they were able to offer us on the buses. The last 2 bullets on this slide talk about unique features of school buses, not just electric school buses, but most school buses in their operation. They have a predictable, most of the day, predictable operation schedule of about 4 to 6 hours of use per day. And they only operate about 180 days a year, so they're certainly not operating every day. So why is that important? Those use cases and that operation schedule is important to us because we want to test vehicle-to-grid technology as part of this initiative. The large batteries in these school buses, you can see in this image on this screen, each of the school buses have up to 220 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack, and the buses can deliver up to 150 miles of range on a single charge. From talking to school districts, they don't need that range every day. They don't need that big of a battery, but it allows them to get comfortable with the technology without having range anxiety, and it also allows these school buses, the batteries in the buses, to act as battery storage. So we can test the technology and see if the battery storage will be a good resource for the electric grid. So, for example, in times when there are peak energy needs or renewable resources that are at peak output, but then they're intermittent, the batteries can provide stability for the grid, can provide local grid resources for the electric grid in that area. We're also looking at the technology to see if the batteries could be used during emergency situations. So, while we're interested in the school districts, or excuse me, the electric school bus initiative in these school districts for a lot of the sustainability benefits, we're also interested in the technology benefits as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the benefits to the localities themselves. So Dominion is providing these school buses to the localities essentially at cost parity to a diesel bus. So we pay the difference between, for the school district to go between the diesel bus and the electric bus. But the localities get to keep all of their operational savings. These school buses can reduce the operations and maintenance costs for schools by up to 60%. And we estimate that each bus will provide about $700 a month in operational savings for the school district. And that's, data we collected in looking at industry averages and talking with school districts, but that's something that we'll certainly be measuring in the phase. And in the bottom left corner down on the screen, you can see the charge port for these school buses. The charging stations are fast charging. They're 60 kW fast chargers. They're Proterra charging stations. And Dominion Energy will be installing the charging infrastructure for each school district at no cost to the. So on this last slide, I want to talk more about, I talked a lot about the value of the batteries on the buses and the value that brings to the utility and can bring to the school districts, but I want to make it clear that the #1 objective for this initiative is and will always be safe student, safe pupil transportation for our school district. All of these school buses will be equipped with safety belts. We've heard that one of the things that drivers and school administrators like about the school buses is they're quieter, so the drivers can hear what's going on and they can concentrate. And of course, cleaner air. So not just carbon emissions, but local air quality improvement as well. These buses have no tailpipe emissions. So, a couple weeks ago, before it was 110 degrees in Virginia, I was behind a school bus, and it may have been I think it was a school bus, but it was an activity bus, and I had my sunroof open, and so I'm sitting at the light, and the fumes and the smoke from the emissions were coming into my car, and I was a toddler in the car, and it was in that moment where I just really had a real life moment of noticing the air quality emissions, not just the carbon emissions. And most of these children on the school buses are right at tailpipe height, so we really think that this is going to provide a lot of benefit to them from an air quality perspective as well. And next, I would like to hand off to our next speakers, Jay and George with the Greensboro Transit.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, we hear you, George.
Okay. All right. Again, good afternoon. I want to thank everyone for this opportunity for the City of Greensboro and Keolis to present to you all our overall operations of our newly electric buses. My name is George Linney. I'm Transit Systems Analysis for the City of Greensboro. I also have with me Jay Perkins. He's the Director of Maintenance for Keolis. Keolis is our contractor that pretty much handles all of our day-to-day operations of our transit system, maintaining the buses, dealing with the operators, training, and so forth. And so he is representing Keolis Transportation, and we're here today just to go over briefly our operations, and hopefully this will give you an overview of how Greensboro and what Greensboro is doing in the community. Before I start off, I just want to start off with just a little bit of an overview of GTA, just kind of give you a brief history of GTA. Greensboro Transit been providing transit services in the Greensboro area since 1991. Prior to that, it was our electrical company named Duke Power that was handling the transit systems at that time. So the City of Greensboro took over from them in 1991, and we've been operating ever since. Keolis has been our contractor, and actually they've been our contractors for right now a little bit over a year now, going on 2 years. So they're the ones that are actually maintaining and the overall operations and maintaining our buses. GTA serves the city limits of Greensboro, which is approximately a population of 295,000, also a total of 131 square miles of service. We currently operate 16 routes and 1 connector route throughout the city limits of Greensboro. Most of our routes start off from the downtown area from our depot, our J.W. Gallion Depot, which is located on Washington Street, if you're familiar with the Greensboro area. It's also our multimodal transportation center, where it also houses our Amtrak station and also our Greyhound station. So pretty much all of our routes originate from that location, then spread out to their different routes throughout the city limits of Greensboro, and then come back to the depot to make the transfers. We do have 1 connector route that does not make connection to the depot, but actually stay out in the service area and connect with different routes along the line. There's the southern part of our Greensboro, so we do have 1 connected route that's operating us for. Our operating Before COVID, we have been operating on weekdays from 5:15 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. With 30-minute frequencies, pretty much from early morning to 6:00 p.m., 6:30 p.m. We operate on 30-minute service or 30-minute frequency. After that point, up to 7:30 to 11:30 at night, we operate on hourly frequencies. On Saturdays, we operate from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. with hourly frequencies on each one of the routes. And we also operate on Sundays from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. with hourly services throughout the day. Since COVID has had an impact on our services, we're currently just operating hourly services on all of our routes. And we actually ending our services earlier on the weekdays and on Saturdays. We're ending at 8:30 p.m. on weekdays and 8 o'clock on Saturdays. We are reviewing that on a daily basis and trying to get to the point where we'll be able to go back to full service. As far as the bus inventory is concerned, we have a total of about 48 buses, fixed route buses in our fleet. We range from Gillig manufacturer, New Flyers, and Proterra. Proterra is actually our electric buses. We have a range of 35-foot buses, which has a passenger seating capacity of 32 passengers. 40-foot buses, which has a capacity of 40 seated passengers. We have a wide range of diesel buses, hybrid diesel buses, and they're actually electric. And a range of buses range from oldest fleet is we have a couple of our 2006 models right now, which is we use on a contingency basis, up through 2019, which is our newest fleet of Proterra buses. Next part of the slide just kind of gives you an overview of our purchasing process of our electric buses. Back in May of 2017, we had placed a RFP for our electric buses. I'm not sure when the award was for the Proterra buses, but after that we received our first set of buses, our first 10 buses. First 4 was delivered on January of 2019. As you see on the slide, the purchase price and the individual charger price for each one of those buses. We actually had to upgrade our maintenance parking area to set aside a charging station for each one of the buses. So that was a cost for us to do that. And also we have a fast charging station which is located at our depot, and Jay will go in detail about how we operate with that, how it operates with our on our Proterra fleet on that fast charger. Next set of buses were delivered in March of 2019, and again, the majority of the fundings for these buses are grant funding that helped fund these buses. So we had the first set of 10 buses to arrive at our fleet by the spring of 2019. Next set of buses, and we have a total of 16 Proterra buses. So the last 6 buses that were brought into our fleet, next set was brought in the month of June of 2019, and then the last 3 was in November of 2019. So that pretty much gives you an overview of where we're at, how we purchase the buses, where we stand as using them throughout the day. Also wanted to let you know that we pretty much operate every day. We even operate on holidays. The only time that GTA is pretty much closed completely is on New Year's Day and on Thanksgiving Day and on Christmas. So other holidays we operate services on throughout the city of Greensboro. So from this point, I want to give it off to Jay to kind of give us the overall operation and maintenance on the Proterra buses.
Good afternoon. I really want to speak about some lessons learned. When we first took on operating the electric buses, it's such a new product that we really didn't know what to expect. So this isn't meant to seem negative, but more lessons learned and things to think about before implementing an electric fleet. Greensboro has one of the newest fleets of Proterra Catalyst E2 buses. They have an advertised range of 200 miles on a single charge. This is only in perfect condition. We're averaging about 130 miles on a charge. Hills and temperature can greatly affect that. To track battery power usage and chargers, we use Proterra's Apex. Proterra Apex can track software or state of charge, vehicle cabin temperature, ambient temperature, speed, basically everything that impacts vehicle efficiency. Apex can also monitor energy delivered to vehicle chargers. If a charger has a malfunction, an email, text message containing a list of errors is sent. We only have one fast charger located at our main transit facility. We have to rotate 16 buses on and off of this charger throughout the day. This creates some huge operational challenges. Electric vehicles make up 33% of our fleet. Ensuring vehicles have sufficient charge to make it through the routes, it has taken some creative planning. Our extra board utilization has increased due to downtime related to quick charging. Fast charging is not as easy as it sounds. The unit will only fast charge between 40 and 69%. If you're too early or late, it will only slow charge at a rate of 10% per hour. If you connect to the charger between 40 and 69%, the unit will reach a 70% state of charge in about 15 minutes. If the system were to charge any sooner or later, it could cause damage to the main battery and significantly reduce the useful lifespan. As I mentioned earlier, we have one fast charger. In July of 2019, we had a major fast charger breakdown. For 3 days, 33% of our fleet was crippled due to this failure. Since that incident, a process has been made to minimize the impact of fast charger failure. Our main base of operations is located 10 minutes away from our actual depot. If the fast charger is down, we only deploy half of our electric fleet. Once a vehicle reaches a 20% state of charge, it is brought back to base and swapped with a fully charged unit and placed on slow charge. We keep rotating vehicles to ensure we have sufficient number of units for service. When the city of Greensboro decided to go electric, they jumped in feet first, without fully considering the need for proper infrastructure and the challenges that would be encountered without it. Early on, we had more units than chargers, and the chargers we did have were inoperable more often than not. At one point, we had 16 e-buses and 10 chargers. On average, 4 of the chargers were out of service. We were in a constant state of juggling buses on and off of chargers to making it nearly impossible to have units ready for service the next day. We have since had additional slow chargers installed. Now each bus has its own charger, and our maintenance staff has been trained in charger maintenance and repair, greatly reducing the impact of charger malfunction. As many of you know, finding a diesel technician can be challenging. Finding someone who knows how to work on electric vehicles can seem nearly impossible. It took a lot of research and many conversations with the manufacturer to develop a job description to assist in finding individuals capable of accurately diagnosing and repairing these units. This is not an easy transition for most conventional mechanics, so we reached out and looked for individuals that had strong background in mechatronics. These individuals focused their education in engineering, electrical, and mechanical systems. Our operators also had some concerns. Drivers sometimes fear the information that they read on the dash is different from what is actually going on with the bus. An example would be a state of charge. They may feel the bus will run out of battery before the display indicates that it will. Drivers also find docking the unit to the fast charger threatening. Once you get close enough, the bus takes over and docks itself. Trusting a bus to drive itself is not easy for most folks. Drivers have reported injuries related to steering wheel positioning and throttle pedal location. These reports have all but gone away as drivers have gotten used to the vehicle. Operators drive buses differently. It depends on whether or not they like to drive electric units. Those who like them like to see how far they can push vehicles. These units have regenerative charging or braking, meaning that as you brake, the batteries recharge. If the brakes are gently applied for a longer period of time, the batteries charge more. If you're heavy on the brakes and the accelerator, the battery state of charge will reduce. Our training department has focused on electric vehicle operation. Because of this, drivers have gotten much more comfortable and proficient at operating these vehicles. Proterra has been a really good vendor to deal with. They've been right there with us through everything. They've been very supportive during our transition to electric vehicles, offering support any way they could. They have field service reps on site and can normally be out within a day or so in the event of an issue. It is worth mentioning that they're a relatively new company and they are working out the bugs in a lot of the facets of their organization, but they're very supportive and have been there with us anytime we've needed anything. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jay and George and Kate, for your wonderful presentations. We've got about 20 minutes left in our session today. So again, we've a bunch of questions in the Q&A box, but if anyone else in the audience has questions, feel free to enter those there. And I just wanted to say we did get a question about if slides will be made available post-presentation. We will be sending out PDF versions of the slides from today's presentations to all the participants once the webinar has completed. So while we wait for some more questions to roll in, I had one that I wanted to get started with. So maybe I'll throw this one at Greensboro, and then Kate, if you want to step in after an answer from your perspective. So what questions should fleet managers be asking early on in the process of starting an electric bus program? So George or Jay, if either of you want to take that first.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah. What questions from your perspective, so knowing what you know after having implemented your electric bus program, what questions should fleet managers be asking early on in the process of starting a similar electric bus program?
Yeah, you know, they need to be really focusing on the infrastructure, making sure you have enough chargers for each bus, enough slow chargers for each bus, and then also the fast charger. It's really a good idea to have multiple fast chargers, at least two or one, you know, centrally located throughout the city that your units can hit throughout their routes. You know, with these things costing $500,000, that's a huge cost. So, you know, that needs to be worked into the overall plan. Also, finding technicians can be a challenge. Like I mentioned earlier, you know, diesel technicians or conventional mechanics can struggle learning this new technology. You know, it's you really have to be able to use a computer and a multimeter. So we've had to, you know, look for people who have backgrounds in engineering and electrical and mechanical systems. So it takes a whole new breed of mechanic to work on these things. So those are the two things that I would really focus on when making a decision.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. And then Kate, from your perspective, from the utility side of things, are there things you think fleet managers should be considering early on in the process of procuring electric transit or school buses?
I agree with Jay. I really think that one of the first things to consider is infrastructure, the location of your depot, the layout of your depot, your future plans for the depot, and then, of course, engaging with your utility and helping us understand your near-term and long-term plans for infrastructure and capacity requirements.
Awesome. So to jump off of that question, we got a couple questions from the audience about training to the drivers. So I know Greensboro has already, or Jay mentioned in his presentation that drivers for Greensboro buses, a lot of those operator concerns were addressed the longer those folks were driving the buses. But Kate, for the electric school bus pilot in Virginia, are you guys providing any sort of training to the school bus drivers that will be driving electric models?
Part of the agreement with some of the partnerships we have with the vendors and the distributors of the school buses includes training for the school districts and for the maintenance folks. But we also want to do some outreach in the community so that the community can recognize these buses and see the benefits it's providing to children.
Great. So I've also seen a couple questions come across about future plans. So this question is for both Dominion and Greensboro. So do you guys have plans for future phases of the electric school bus pilot or procuring more electric transit buses? And are you installing charging infrastructure only for the buses you have now, or are you planning for future bus acquisitions later on by installing additional infrastructure for charging?
Okay, as far as for Greensboro is concerned, we are looking at ways of increasing our infrastructure as far as charging stations, trying to add maybe another fast charger location at the depot, as well as our maintenance facility. And also, as we develop a route along the city limits of Greensboro, try to identify maybe some of those key element areas that we can provide maybe a charging station, i.e. maybe a hub that will also be a mini-sized depot where all the buses can also connect to, and also be a charging station as well. So we're looking at those for the near future to possibly expand our electric fleet.
Awesome. And Kate, same question to you. Are you guys planning for charging infrastructure, are you planning for future iterations of your pilot program by installing more charging infrastructure, or is that going to come down the road?
Both. In the localities that we're deploying school buses this year, we're putting in infrastructure for certainly the school buses that will be there, but then a little bit more in the future based on our conversations with these school districts and their interest. A lot of them had interest in having more school buses than we were able to deploy. So, in order to plan for the future, we are putting in more conduit and making sure we have the service capacity there. That was also something we looked at when selecting the school districts. We wanted to get these on the road as soon as possible. So we were looking at locations, depots and schools that had capacity, at least upline on the circuit. If we had to put in a new transformer, if we had to put in local infrastructure, that was fine. But as long as the circuit and the substation could handle them, that was something like that as well.
I have a quick question, actually, jumping off of what you just said in terms of criteria that you used to select the school districts that received those buses in the school bus pilot program. Was there any sort of push to get, I know you said local capacity is a barrier or something you considered, but was there any sort of push to get those school buses into low-income areas or areas that probably suffer worse effects of air pollution?
So we did want to get them in. We wanted geographic and community diversity in the localities that we selected for testing the technology. But really the deciding factor was the grid benefit. These are grid resources. They're part of our rate base. So we looked at what sort of grid benefit we could get at each of these locations. That was the main deciding factor. But I really think that an equity component is incredibly important. We heard that from a lot of stakeholders, and it is certainly something that we are looking at very hard for the next phase of the program.
Awesome. So this is a question for probably more for Greensboro initially, but Kate, feel free to jump in too if you have an answer. Do you guys consider the life cycle cost for the buses compared to diesel or hybrid buses when you're looking at financial benefits of running these buses compared to conventional alternatives?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we looked at as far as going into the electric bus, is the cost savings that we're expecting to receive for just the overall usage of the buses. Fuel savings, way I understand it, maintenance savings, not maintaining as much on the electric bus as you would with a conventional diesel or hybrid diesel bus. So we're looking at those and kind of comparing now with what those costs, since we've had these electric buses now for a little over a year. So now we're kind of doing a comparison of seeing, the first year, how we're looking comparing to a regular diesel and hybrid buses. So that will kind of help us on making, any type of future decisions.
And Kate, do you have any perspective on life cycle costs with the school buses in Virginia?
We have those conversations with the school districts and the localities, and similar to what Jay and George were talking about with Greensboro, we've had those conversations with transit agencies as well. But we were really looking at the battery, and so we were looking. One of the reasons we selected the Thomas Built Julie bus and the Proterra battery technology was the battery warranty that we got on that. We got a lifetime warranty on that battery, and that's really important for us as we test this technology and use it as a grid resource.
Awesome. Yeah, so Kate, I know you've mentioned vehicle-to-grid capabilities of the school buses. I'm wondering in Greensboro if you guys have done any sort of either thinking or planning for vehicle-to-grid capabilities of your electric buses down in Greensboro at all. If that's something you're thinking about.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question, please?
Yeah. Have you guys considered possible applications, like vehicle-to-grid applications of the electric buses that you guys have in Greensboro, so using those buses as a grid asset?
Okay, I'm still kind of unclear.
Yeah, I can take that one if you'd like. When George and Jay were showing how often their buses operate and how crucial it is for them to be charged and ready, that's one of the reasons why Dominion Energy is looking at this with school buses and not transit buses. School buses are not on the road every day. They're not on the road from sun up to sundown. Transit buses operate, some of them operate 365 days a year, 15, 18 hours a day. So the ability to do vehicle-to-grid and have those batteries available for grid services is harder on the transit side because they're out on the roads. But on the other hand, the benefits that transit buses get from electrifying, they're able to get some of those operational savings more quickly and see some of those benefits and life cycle costs efficiencies because the buses are running so much. So this transit is just a little bit different market.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I appreciate the distinction. I think that's an important thing to think about when you're considering medium and heavy duty electrification, how often they're going to be running, and if that's even a possibility to use them or to take advantage of vehicle-to-grid technology. So I appreciate that. I want to ask a quick question of Greensboro about the day-to-day operations of these buses. So we got a couple questions both in the pre-registration as well as through the chat box about how your electric buses fare in adverse conditions, so steep and hilly terrain, winter weather, compared to the conventional vehicles in your fleet. So wondering if you see variations, and I know you mentioned this a little bit, Jay, about variations in battery operation with temperature, but I'm wondering how they fare in other adverse conditions as well.
Sure. Really, in the summer, there's not much effect at all. Operating the air conditioning system doesn't seem to draw too awful much of it. Now the heat is another story. We tend to lose about 20 to 25% of the range during the winter time. But we're still able to utilize the fast charger at the depot in most circumstances and really prevent any major service disruptions or anything.
Great. Kate, I wonder actually if I can pose the same question to you, if you've been able to see any differences with adverse weather or adverse driving conditions with the school buses?
Yeah, that's definitely something we want to measure. We're going to be looking at the range and the operational aspects of the bus depending on temperature, but also depending on weather. You know, how do they operate in rain or tiny amounts of snow, because sometimes schools cancel in Virginia, even if there's a threat of snow. So that's certainly something we're going to be looking at. But as an electric vehicle driver, and I know there's some other electric vehicle drivers on the call, batteries don't love cold weather. So we do know there's going to be some impact, so we are going to try to measure.
Awesome.
Hey, Caitlin, if I could,
yeah.
Caitlin, this is George. If I could also add another portion to that too, is that we even seen in Greensboro that certain routes, depending on which of the Proterra buses that we put on, we noticed that certain routes may have an impact on it due to the ridership on that particular route. If one route is we're picking up more than the other, we tend to see to have a usage of that buses more often, you know, opening doors, opening and closing doors more, utilizing the wheelchair lift more than other routes, and just the overall length of the route itself, and whether it had more hills or more plain, flat land than other routes. So even that, we had, when we were receiving these Proterra buses, we went through a thorough study of each one of the routes, and Proterra, the staff persons there, they pretty much helped us on doing an analogy of each one of the routes and just kind of showed us, even, in certain conditions, some routes, if it's just a perfect day, not using any air conditioning or heating or so, just the general, the normal day-to-day operations of, opening, closing doors and going up and down the hills, certain routes even have more of an impact than others. So they were able to let us know which one of those routes are in, so that we can strategically put out certain, buses on certain routes, maybe certain times of the day or so. One thing we also noticed that, by us having a full charge for that bus for the next day, we cannot utilize these buses at night. So we have to bring these buses in even early at night so that it'll have a full charge for the next morning, since we start off so early in the morning at 5:15. So that's another thing that we had to, keep in mind on our day-to-day operations, that that has an impact on how you utilize your electric bus.
Yeah, that's super helpful info, George. I appreciate you sharing that. We got a question earlier, and I apologize I missed it scrolling through the chat box, but Jay or George, we had one person asking what were the funding sources, the granting agencies that you guys received funding for the first few buses.
As far as funding, we basically, I know the first part of funding we use individual bonds to offset some of the costs on the first set, but then there was other second part of the was used with this regular funding that we use for capital purchases.
Awesome. And then this is a question for everybody. So I know there's lots of benefits that you guys mentioned seeing already, but were there any benefits to implementing these electric buses in your service territories that you didn't expect to see, or pleasant outcomes that you might not have planned for but were positives anyway? So unexpected benefits that you've been seeing?
Yes, one thing that I can probably add to that is that they're definitely a quieter bus. Like the noise it's very minimum. You can hardly know that they're passing by you if you're close by, and also there's just the environmental positive things with it, that saving more cleaner air for the usage of electric buses. Those just one of the top things that we also, to add on to other things that that we receive from these electric buses.
Great. Kate, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I just wanted to mention one comment that we had heard from a school district. Some school districts in Virginia have announced what plans they have for kids going back to school, and some haven't. But this comment was made, maybe a month ago before any schools had decided what they were going to do. But one of the things they were thinking about from a social distancing perspective is, elementary school kids, tiny kids can fit 2 or 3 in the seat. But with social distancing, they were thinking of maybe having, one child to a row or one child to a seat. And in doing so, they would have to take more trips in the school buses. And, for morning routes, that would really help them get a little bit more of the operational benefit. Like I was mentioning, that the transit buses run so often, they're on the road so often that they're getting that, total cost of ownership, the cost per mile down. But school buses don't run that often. So in areas where the mileage is pretty low, we were thinking that maybe they would realize, more operational savings in some of those cases. So that's something we'll certainly measure, and hopefully it's some small bit of silver lining to the pandemic.
Yeah, that's great. And definitely, I know that's been a lot of talk about, reduced bus capacity in North Carolina as well. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. I wanted to highlight one question. Jay answered it via the Q&A box, but I just wanted to announce it to everybody. We had a question about if Greensboro has considered installing a microgrid and incorporating renewables to safeguard against outages. And Jay answered that they have considered this, and there are discussions going on now about installing solar shelters in their yard, but comes down to funding considerations. And then Jacob, I wondered if you had any comments you wanted to put in before the webinar for today.
No, I don't think so. I appreciate you monitoring, Caitlin, and for our speakers to really run through a long list of questions and engagement. So thank you guys for that. The thing I would mention is that, again, kind of just referencing those 2 upcoming webinars over the months of August and September. We will be covering purchasing and policy considerations as we think about, again, the large need to maybe cover some of the higher upfront costs, as many agencies and organizations would be, of course, needing to factor that in. So, if you're intrigued by the benefits of either the electric school or transit buses, and we will also be kind of expanding that conversation for really all of the medium and heavy-duty vehicle classes. So I think that's really it from my end, Caitlin.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of our panelists for their wonderful presentations. I hope all of you on the call were able to learn something new today and maybe have a couple ideas to run with for potential fleet electrification in the future. As Jacob mentioned, we do have 2 more webinars in this series coming up, so keep your eyes out for more details about those, and hopefully we'll see some of you on those calls. So again, thank you guys for attending so much. We appreciate the interest in this topic, and we're looking forward to future conversations. So thanks, everybody.